over the years the design of football boots has drastically changed. So in this video I'm going to count down what I think are the 5 most revolutionary football boots of all time. But firstly, let me actually define what I mean by revolutionary, as this is more to do with product design and performance of football boots. So in essence I'm talking about boots that cause kind of reverberations when they dropped in the market. So in essence I'm talking about maybe a brand has dropped a boot with a certain concept or design aspect which has caused other brands to follow suit and have their own kind of versions of it. Now with that being said, let me start with 3 honourable mentions. Firstly, we have the Lotto Zero Gravity, which truly was a boot ahead of its time. The boot was released in the mid-2000s and was the first football boot in the market to be laceless. My next honourable mention is the Hyper Venom Phantom, released back in 2013 with Neymar as the lead sponsor and probably one of the most strong introduction to a football boot on the market that we've ever seen. And in terms of innovation, the boot was incredible. Firstly, it introduced the concept of an agility silo and showed the world of football boots that you can actually make synthetic football boots which aren't stiff. And that mesh-like synthetic upper that the Hyper Venom had is still seen throughout the market today. And my final honourable mention is the Adidas Air50 Adi Zero. Released in 2010 and arguably has one of the strongest runs of any football boot silo ever. I think the Adi Zero brought a new benchmark in what it meant to be a speed boot in terms of its lightweightness and its innovation. It was also offered in 2 variations, so you had a synthetic upper and then you had a leather upper, so depending on your taste you could have either one. And with that out of the way, let's start our countdown. At number 5 we have a boot that many people would not have heard of, but it was made by a brand that everyone knows, and I'm talking about the Adidas Argentino, which was released back in 1954. And what a lot of people do not know is that this boot actually helped Germany win the World Cup that year in what is known as the Miracle of Bern. And what made this boot so legendary is that it gave concept to one of the things that we see still to this day on modern football boots. The boots were designed by Adidas CEO Adolf Dassler, and his design of the Adidas Argentino was drastically different to everything else that was available at the time. The Adidas Argentino was still made from leather, but it did use some synthetic materials and a narrow last, which in turn made the boot lighter and more flexible. It also featured a lower cut and removed the hard toe cap that was a main feature on football boots at the time, which in turn allowed players to get better contact on the ball. Now, the thing that made this boot so revolutionary and set it apart was the fact that it was the first football boot to feature the concept of screw-in studs. Depending on the playing surface, so say if it's really wet and muddy, you can screw in some metal studs. If it's firmer, you can screw in some rubber studs. So in essence, it gave birth to the concept of maybe a modular football boot, or you could say soft ground football boots in general. At number 4, we have the Nike CTR 360 Maestri. Released back in 2009, the boot was actually inspired by Barcelona's style of play according to Nike, with CTR standing for control, touch, receive. Now this boot was revolutionary for a lot of things. So one of them, it kind of gave birth to this new outlook into what we still see today in the synthetic leather variations of football boots and what Nike called Kanga Light. It also gave birth to the concept of control boots, a silo in what in my opinion kind of killed off the power silo, as a lot of other brands started to like rebrand their boots that were power boots to control boots. Now the introduction of synthetic leather, even though people don't like it, is very revolutionary in the fact that brands were able to offer football boots who have that still that traditional feel that you got from leather to some extent, as well as making the boots lighter and more water resistance at the time, as kangaroo leather or calf leather, whatever leather, did take up a lot more water. The introduction of synthetic leather that didn't take up more water was, you know, a big step forward. At number 3, I have the Adidas Predator. Released in 1994, the original concept of the boot was actually from former Liverpool player Craig Johnston. Johnston came up with the idea of attaching polymeric materials like silicone or rubber to the upper of football boots to enhance grip so players get better contact when striking the ball. Little did he know that he gave birth to one of the most revolutionary concepts in football boots that we still see to this day. And I guess you can say it gave birth to the idea of the power silo. Not only did the Predator go on to be one of the most well-known football boots of all times, in terms of what it did and the reverberations it sent around the market, I think Adidas might have had a patent, because I think it was until much later that brands kind of introduced their own kind of like silicone or rubber elements to the upper of boots. So Nike didn't do the Total 90 Laser till like I want to say 2007 or so, and then the reply from other brands came later as well. So it might have been a patent, but like the idea of heavily textured uppers to enhance grip. It started with the Predator, and it's still seen to this day, and is like a main thing with whatever, you know, your kind of control, precision or power silos. They're all kind of like the same thing, but they all kind of stem from the Adidas Predator. Now, first and second are very interchangeable. Really, it depends who you ask, how old they are, but for me, it's a mixture of that and the fact of my own kind of playing experience. So firstly, at number 2, I have the Nike Mercurial. Released in 1998 ahead of the World Cup that year, the software of the boot was all phenomenal, or the Brazilian Ronaldo, and what this boot marks is probably, I want to say, Nike's football equivalent to the Air Jordan. Now, this boot was innovative and revolutionary in many ways. So first of all, it kind of gave birth to the idea of speed boots, and along with that, it was like the first kind of major boot that was made from synthetic materials. All the other boots were, you know, they're only mainly built from, they did have some materials, but the upper was mainly just leather. And it was also the lightest boot on the market at the time, so it weighed around, I want to say, 230 grams. So in today's day and age, it's pretty much a heavyweight, but back then it was a bit different. So yeah, you know, it kind of exceeded expectations and the imagination of what a football boot or a lightweight football boot meant. And since then, we've seen like the domino effect of that's had. We've seen like the likes of, like I didn't honorable mention, the Adidas Zero, that kind of stems more from the Mercurial. We've seen other brands making lightweight football. We've seen it with Mizuno, we've seen it with Puma. Adidas have that 99 gram boot as well, but even just like they kind of pushing the boundary when it comes to how lightweight a football boot can be, which is still like functionally good and usable. It also kind of broadened the horizons of the different materials that we can see being used on football boots. So it started with synthetics, you move on to like knits, now we have string as well, so who knows what's next. And at number 1, we have 2 football boots, but they came out at the exact same time, so a lot of you probably know what I'm talking about. So at number 1, we have the Nike Maista Obra / the Nike Mercurial Superfly 4. Released back in 2014 ahead of the World Cup in Brazil that year, these 2 football boots revolutionized what football boots felt and looked like, and in my opinion, optimized football boot design. Now, one of the most extraordinary things about this boot were the fact they were completely made from one-piece knitted uppers. So they weren't the first boot to introduce the concept of a knitted upper. I think that was the Adidas Prime Knit, but you know, that was only an exclusive release. But I think Nike, they did it more in the correct way, and this was more of a broad release, and they were the first ones to introduce that kind of one-piece construction. Like another major feature that we see, apart from like the one-piece uppers that we see throughout the market, was the idea of what Nike call a dynamic fit collar or mid-cut football boots, with the idea that it helped improve lockdown, made your boots feel more responsive and almost like an extension of your foot while still feeling like you're playing football in a sock, giving this like rejuvenated feeling of wearing a football boot. And there you have it, my top 5 most revolutionary football boots of all time. Let me know your 5 in the comments down below. Don't forget to like the video and support the channel by subscribing for everything football boot related. And as always, my name is Sub, this has been SubStanceFtb. Thank you for watching. Peace out.